Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're joined by a congressional delegation who spent 2.5 days at Fort Hood, Texas, following up on the Fort Hood Independent Review Commission. For our press conference today, we have about 30 minutes, a hard stop. I ask that before any questions you state your name and affiliation. I'll turn it over now to Congresswoman Jackie Speier.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jackie Speier. I'm a member of Congress from California. I'm here today as chair of the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee. 8 months ago, I was here along with members of the Military Personnel Subcommittee and others to begin an investigation into Fort Hood. I said then that we would come back, and we have. It's been about 1 year since the brutal murder of Vanessa Guillen. Since then, there has been an investigation by an independent review committee that has recommended 70 different changes here at Fort Hood. We were engaged in a conversation over the last 2 days with the leadership of Fort Hood on how many of those recommendations have been implemented. And I'm happy to report that the vast majority of them have been. I guess my number one message this afternoon is that Vanessa Guillen did not die in vain. She will be forevermore associated with our commitment to take sexual harassment and sexual assault cases out of the chain of command. The truth of the matter is that the time has come for the military to recognize that spending billions of dollars on sexual harassment and assault prevention and still having 20,000 service members a year who are victims, with some 5,000 reporting and maybe only 150 to 200 actually convicted, is not accountability. Now, I'm happy to say that Fort Hood has taken very seriously the criticisms they've received. They have indeed created a campaign around people first. We talked to not just the leadership at Fort Hood, we talked to E1s, E4s, we talked to the first combat arms officers that are female. We talked to family members. There is a seismic change at Fort Hood in terms of the way they are treating their soldiers. Probably one of the most important steps they took was returning to what they call a leader book, so that they connect with each of their soldiers, know where they live, know their telephone numbers, and connect with their families. There are still many areas that require attention here at Fort Hood, as they do in many of our installations throughout the military. They are quality of life issues. And I continue to say that when the service member serves, so does his or her family. And that brings us to the housing shortage at Fort Hood and the housing conditions at Fort Hood. We visited barracks, we visited homes on base, and there is a desperate need to deal with the asbestos, the lead, the mold. We met with families that are living on base who continue to have problems. We talked to soldiers who continue to put in work orders and do not get them addressed. We have an obligation to these soldiers and their families to give them quality housing. And we are going to take steps to make sure that happens. Secondly, the issue of child care. There's inadequate child care on the base, and there are waiting lists, and we need to address that as well. The op-tempo that we heard so much about when we were here the last time has changed, and soldiers indicated that the quality of their lives has improved. Now, there's also still an issue with the Criminal Investigative Division. I am not at all confident that we have the right mix of civilians. We frankly don't have civilians for the most part in the Army CID. That needs to change. They came out with an announcement today that they're going to change it after we held a hearing on it a few weeks ago, but there's no details. So we will continue to hold the Army accountable in terms of making sure they have a first-rate criminal investigation division to provide the kind of oversight and safety to our service members. Now, Fort Hood has been placed under a microscope, but I don't know that they are an outlier. I am concerned that we have similar issues at installations around the country. And this committee will continue to do its oversight responsibilities and evaluate these installations one by one. The one thing I do know is that Fort Hood could become the spotlight, the role model for installations around the country as to how to fix these problems. When I stood here 8 months ago, I said, this may be the moniker, a great place, but it wasn't a great place. Today, I can say with great confidence, it's a much better place than it was 8 months ago. And I want to salute the leadership of General White and his leadership team for taking seriously all of the recommendations made by the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee. Fort Hood now is a much better place than it ever was before. I now am going to turn it over to my colleagues. First is Mark Vesey, a member of the committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear. I'm Mark Vesey. I represent the 33rd Congressional District in Dallas-Fort Worth, just a little bit north of here. We're going to let the locomotive pass by. Once the locomotive gets a little further up. There we go. I'm Mark Vesey. I'm the congressman for the 33rd Congressional District, Fort Worth, Arlington, Dallas. Thank you very much. And also a member of the House Armed Services Committee. And I wanted to make sure that I was a part of this particular visit. I've been to Fort Hood before because of Vanessa Guillen. A lot of the constituency that I represent was very worried about Vanessa Guillen and what happened, the aftermath of it, which led to her death. And I'm saddened that obviously about what happened. I don't think that Vanessa Guillen needed to become a victim for things to change here. I'm glad that things have changed here because of what happened. But I think that it's a terrible tragedy that she paid with her life the way that she did, because we could have been doing better. And I believe that Fort Hood really can be a pace setter and making change throughout the military for bases everywhere around the country and around the globe if they take the initiatives to make change seriously. Some of the things that I found that were very encouraging was in a post-Vanessa Guillen world, in a post-George Floyd world, was that I talked with soldiers about how do your NCOs and your commanding officers, now take issues of sexual assault, sexual harassment, racial assault, racial harassment, and they take it much more seriously now than they did before. Again, I don't think that Vanessa Guillen needed to die for that to happen. I think that that's terrible. But to hear soldiers say that, you know what, I was talking with 2 female African-American soldiers today that told me that someone made some very disparaging racial remarks recently, and along with them being racial remarks, also mixed in sexual remarks in there, and that they were dealt with seriously and dealt with swiftly. And now that they think that the person, because they're a repeat offender, that they're now on their way out. I also talked with another female officer that told us that, you know, the kind of stuff that you normally hear when people bring up race, and people just like say, oh, you know, political correctness, this is a bunch of bull. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I don't see color, you know, all that type of stuff that people get tired of hearing. That when people start saying things like that now, when their counterparts say things like that there will be a commanding officer or an NCO that will say, no, we don't do that. You're going to listen and take this seriously now. And I think that's obviously a good thing that the Army and Fort Hood is leading in a positive direction. Some areas where there's still needs to be improvement, obviously, is the housing piece. You know, people shouldn't have to live with mold and termites. Some of the conditions that we saw yesterday and some of the maladies that have resulted because of those conditions, some of those people could be dealing with chronic issues, health issues for the rest of their lives because of this. And that just shouldn't be the case, not for people that are serving our country admirably. It shouldn't be an issue. Also, some of the stories that we heard from single moms, you know, I think in many ways the Army very much still operates like, you know, we're in the 1950s or 1940s. It's very awkward and clumsy, like how they deal with women in today's Army, particularly when it comes to single mothers. And so they have to be more flexible and more adaptable to deal with the growing constituency in our country, and that is single moms. And these single moms are playing a key role and proud to serve, but they shouldn't feel like they need to have to make a choice between staying in or getting out. And if they stay in, risk getting reprimanded because their kid is having a bad stomach ache or have flu, and they don't have any choice but to come to work. They just shouldn't have to make that choice. And so I'm glad to see changes, but I know that that the Army is big, that Fort Hood is big. This is a base, obviously, with a long legacy and history in the Lone Star State, and we're all proud of it. We all have family and our friends that have, as Texans, that have come through this base at one time or another as members of the Army. But they do have to figure out how to really not take it and turn it up a gear to really speed things up so we can start implementing these changes and make it better for people now. So with that, I'll now turn it over to Chrissy Houlihan, who's also a member from Pennsylvania of the Armed Services Committee.
Thank you, everyone, for the chance to talk. My name is Chrissy Houlihan. I represent the 6th Congressional District in Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia. And I want to thank the chairwoman for allowing us to come on this really important opportunity to bear witness. I had the opportunity here to visit many of the places Vanessa haunted, and I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of experience the life that she must have led. The reason why this is important to me is, of course, not only do I serve on the Armed Services Committee and the Military Personnel Committee, but I'm a veteran myself. I served in the Air Force, and I am a third-generation military person. My dad in the Navy, my grandfather in the Navy, my brother actually served as a medic in the Army. So for me, this is personal. For me, this visit is not just to be able to have the experience of what it's like to be here at Fort Hood, but for me, it's to try to understand how to bring those experiences across the military, across all services, across this nation and across the world where all of our men and women are serving. I had the opportunity as one of only a handful or so of women who've served in the uniform who now serve in Congress to found the Service Women and Women Veterans Caucus. It's the first caucus ever of its kind that's focusing on the career trajectory of women in our armed services. And I'm really proud to say that there are more than 50 members bipartisanly who are in support of this new caucus and have the opportunity to think about legislation that affect particularly women in their career trajectory in our services. With that in mind, I'm very much looking forward to taking back the lessons and experiences that I had here. I had the opportunity to listen about healthcare, to listen about childcare, to listen about base housing, to listen about mental health. And I'll bring all of those experiences back on all of our behalves to the caucus and to the committee that I serve on and to the Congress and our country. So with that, I'm enormously grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to serve in this capacity. And I'll turn it over to Sarah Jacobs from California.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you, Chair Spear, for leading this trip and allowing me to come, and thank you to my colleagues for all the work that you've been doing on this issue. My name is Sarah Jacobs. I represent California's 53rd Congressional District in San Diego, a proud military community, one of the biggest in the country, and home to the Pacific Fleet. And I'll be honest with you, I hear from parents and family members all the time worried about whether their loved one in the military is safe, except they're not worried about what's happening overseas. They're worried if they're going to be safe in their barracks. I hear from people all the time who are wondering if it's right or safe to even recommend to the young people in their lives to join the military. And that's why I felt like it was so important for me to come here to Fort Hood, to listen to service members, to see the progress that's been made. And I'll be honest with you, we still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that any service member can serve without fear of sexual assault or harassment. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that no service member is ever failed the way that the system failed Vanessa Guillen. And we have a lot of work to do before we can look a mother in their eyes and tell them that their child will be safe and protected and respected and cared for in our armed services. But I have been very heartened by the progress that I've seen here. It's clear that leadership is taking this issue seriously. They are trying innovative programs to address this problem. And now the trick is to make sure that we sustain those programs, that we deepen them, and that we scale them across the Army and across the services. I'm really looking forward to working with my colleagues towards that end because we owe our service members who serve honorably, who are serving our country, nothing less. Thank you so much. And now I will introduce my colleague, Sylvia Garcia.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Chairwoman Spears, for once again allowing me to join the Armed Services Committee Subcommittee on Military Personnel on this delegation trip. As you all know, I am not a member of the subcommittee, but I am the Congresswoman that represents the Guillen family, and Vanessa Guillen was my constituent. This is the third time I've been here. And let me tell you that I've never been more encouraged by the progress I think that we're making. I think that the chairwoman summarized really well and crystallized what the independent panel review findings were. And yes, indeed, they're making a lot of progress in getting all those recommendations done. I want to just highlight two that were really important. During the investigation process and of course, during the tragic death of Vanessa Guillen, and have always been a concern for the Guillen family. One was, of course, how the Army treats missing persons, the protocols, the notification for the parents, what status the soldier has during that time period, what resources are brought to bear. That already has been implemented as changes, and indeed, I think the protocols are certainly a lot better now than they were before. The second one is dealing with families, the communications with the families. The Guillen family came to me about a year ago because they were having difficulty working through the system here at Fort Hood. They were not getting information. They were not being kept up to date. They sometimes just didn't even know if the command here even was respecting or valuing any of their input. And you saw us all go through all that. Well, the good news is that they're working now on a program where, of course, they're keeping families informed of what's going on with their soldier, and to the point where they're asking, I think it's a squad level person, to call the mother or father to just give them an update on how their son or daughter is doing. That's big news because once you develop a culture that the priority is the soldier, that the priority is to make sure that they're safe and secure and that they have a good quality of life, well, that will continue. And thirdly, I think it's important that we underscore what the chairwoman said. Their new program of People First is focused on that soldier. It is about putting people first. And I think that's a big step, and I think that we'll see a lot more. Like the chairwoman, I still have reservations about CID and their capacity to handle a situation should it occur again, like the Vanessa Guillen case here locally. As was mentioned already, they announced some changes. We'll wait and see what that does. But I think we need to make sure that when we take steps to prevention when it comes to cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment, that's part of it. But the investigation and how it's done, whether it's independent or not, is whether it goes to the chain of command. That's a totally different story. So we've got to keep our eye on this. I think we're making a lot of progress. They are doing a lot to restore trust in the system. And I think the next step is to make sure that there's real accountability in everything that they do. So again, it's good to see some of you all. I'm very encouraged. I know I can go back to the Guillen family and let them know that progress is being made, and Vanessa was a part of that change. Her lasting legacy will be the change that we'll be able to make here at Fort Hood. Thank you all very much. Now yield back now to the chairwoman for any questions.
Thank you, my colleagues. Yes. No, I don't. Frankly, I don't find it promising. I think the contract was poorly crafted. It's a 50-year contract. The commander of the base really has no input as to how the money is going to be spent. It is an attractive arrangement for the company, which is a New York. I mean, it is a publicly held company and has, frankly, nothing to lose. They have a guaranteed income from the BAH that they receive from each service member. The accountability for fixing sewage problems, leaking roofs, mold is really, I think, abysmal. So if I had my druthers right now, I would terminate that contract. We can't seem to get their attention.
So after this visit, what do you think Congress can do to increase that accountability and make these contracts something that better serves these families?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is have the Department of Defense Housing Senior Undersecretary give me an answer as to what are the conditions under which we can terminate that contract, and we'll move forward from there. Right now, they're going to put $425 million into Fort Hood over 10 years, but they're making the call on what they're going to spend it on. They don't maintain these properties well. When they build them, they don't build them with proper flashing. So, even homes that were built in 2009 are leaking. And so then they take the money that's supposed to be set aside to improve and build new housing, and we're repairing the housing that was built because it was built so poorly. This contract was very poorly executed, and if we can terminate it and renegotiate it, that's what I want to do. Yes?
If I may, if that contract could be terminated, what would the next steps be?
Well, we're going to cross that when we get to it. I don't even know if that's feasible. I want to get their attention, and hopefully this will get their attention. Yes.
I have a question, kind of two parts. My name is Jasmine, KCEN Channel 6 News. What is the status of the Lion and the second part of that was last week, Senator
Gillibrand.
Yes, yes. Her and Cruz, they had that, they proposed legislation that's kind of similar to that I am Vanessa Guillen Act. And what is your thoughts?
So we've been working closely together on taking cases of sexual assault out of the chain of command for years. The bill that Senator Gillibrand has introduced would take all non-military crimes out of the chain of command. I'm supportive of that. My particular legislation goes beyond that. The I Am Vanessa Guillen Act also provides for sexual harassment cases to be considered and a crime to be put into the UCMJ as it relates to sexual harassment, and a claims process so that those who are victims and survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the military can file claims for compensation. So we're working together. I can assure you with certain confidence that sexual assault and sexual harassment cases will be taken out of the chain of command in the NDAA this year. I feel very strongly about it. There's bipartisan support in the House. There's bipartisan support in the Senate. The only question is, do we take all non-military crimes out of the chain of command?
Eric from KWTX. I just wanted to know, with Gregory Ordell, Vanessa Guillen, and the few other soldiers that have died, and you spoke with soldiers here today over the past 2 days, how confident are they that they will be able to come to their leadership and speak out and get the help in those situations?
So I'm going to give my colleagues an opportunity to answer that question, and then I'll wrap up.
You know, I'll start. I mean, I think they feel very confident. I talked to a soldier today from Houston. She was about the same age as Vanessa. She was Latina, and she just told me, she said, Congresswoman, a lot has changed. I mean, we feel it after Vanessa Guillen's incident. You know, and I asked her, said, do you feel safe? She said, yes. Do you feel like you can speak up? And she said, yes. She was there speaking up with us, but it was more important to find out if she would be willing to do that if she had an allegation of sexual harassment. And she said, yes. She's told me she feels safer now. And again, ever since the Vanessa Guillen incident.
I would just add to that I was actually kind of stunned by the transparency and the willingness that young enlisted were able to share their stories with us in really large group settings in some cases. And the fact that they felt comfortable to be able to do that, I think, was a pretty good indicator that there's a culture that allows that sort of sharing. I would emphasize that I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. You know, and every group is only as good as its leaders, and so there's definitely different spots that are less open than other spots. But I think, as the chairwoman mentioned, that the work from on high is working in the sense that people know the right words to say. They know that they can say them, and that's really a lot of the battle.
I would just add that in terms of safety on the base, there's more work to be done. I think we need cameras in many places, certainly at the arms rooms, in the barracks, in the motor pool. I think we need better lighting. The general talked about creating a blue light at various locations within the base. The action that was taken to stop trusted travelers was very well received by the rank and file as well. But the safety on the base itself, in terms of property crimes, appears to still be a problem. And so I'm hopeful that they will be addressing that moving forward as well. I don't think for a moment that sexual assault and sexual harassment at Fort Hood or any of our installations has been fixed. It still happens. We need to make sure that those that commit these crimes receive due process, but we also need to make sure that we terminate them, discharge them from the military, and no longer have them as sexual predators. So, if you recall, the Independent Review Committee had a long list of criticisms about CID. We have had 2 hearings exclusively on CID within the subcommittee. The improvements that have been made have been that they have acquired the kind of equipment they should have always had to do forensic work, that they have staffed up. They were inadequately staffed, and 91% of the special agents at the time of Vanessa's death were, in fact, apprentice agents. So staffing up with agents that have 5 years of experience, 7 years of experience will help. But beyond all that, it needs to have a civilian component. And as of this morning, I think they've gotten the message from the committee and from the review committee that maintaining CID as a Army-only body is woefully inadequate. If you look at the Navy, the NCIS is all civilian. If you look at the Air Force, it's a combination. So it appears that they're moving towards a combination. We'll look at whatever recommendations they make in the NDAA, but beyond that, we need professionals running that office.
I think one of the areas,
Sure.
Jackie, I think one of the areas where there seemed to be some improvement is the communication between base investigators and Bell County officials and other local policing entities. Because I was really shocked to learn that before there was really not what I would call adequate communication on criminal investigations. They just really didn't seem to be a real, true, substantive working history with local law enforcement, and it seems like that has definitely changed for the better.
In fact, the police chief of Killeen had indicated that for some time he was trying to get an MOU with Fort Hood and was not successful. As a result of meeting with local law enforcement yesterday, it appears that that is in process. It also appears that the generals are meeting on a monthly basis with the local police chiefs in the area to talk about issues of concern. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.